Mistake number 5. Now, if you fix this, you're gonna instantly get better with your miter saw. Cutting with a miter saw on the ground is absolute rubbish. It's gonna kill your knees, and you're just never gonna get your best work done when you're bent over like a goblin. Even if you take that miter saw and you put it up onto a makeshift table, you're still gonna struggle wildly with the longer material to get safe and accurate cuts. You gotta get a proper stand. And it doesn't have to be an expensive stand. Every saw that I've ever owned, I've just found a cheap stand that I could modify. This here is the cheapest stand you can get off Amazon. So I took this $69 stand and improved it drastically. I bolted some scrap hardwood onto the miter saw, and then I built some 3/4 inch plywood wings with a little stiffening rail at the bottom that attaches to the end. Screw that onto the hardwood here, and you've got yourself a set of beautiful plywood wings that are gonna support all kinds of material. The nice thing here too is if you want to screw on any kind of a stop block or just clamp it on, you can make repetitive cuts that way. If you're doing any kind of crown molding, you can screw a rail across the front here. That's the best way to cut crown molding accurately. And it's just gonna be nice. Any size piece that you're gonna cut, it's not gonna fall down in between the stand. The plywood wings are just something that I've done for every saw that I've ever owned. They make a huge difference. Mistake number 4, leaving the stock blade on your miter saw and using it for everything. There's no better way to piss off your carpenter friend than invite him over to do some baseboards, and your saw has the stock blade. Now you can see here with these pine door casing trims that I've cut, with the general purpose 32 tooth blade, when you put those miters together, you can just see it's a sloppy fit. If you put on the finished blade that I have, which is a 72 tooth blade, and you put that miter together, that is clean. That's the way that finishing material should join up. So I'm not saying get rid of your all-purpose blade. Keep it. It's the perfect blade for cutting framing materials like 2x4 or decking. If you're doing any kind of flooring, especially vinyl plank, which is very tough on blades, use it for that. For your finish work, you really should get a dedicated finishing blade. Now, the Auchlon blades, in my opinion, are the best value of any of the blades out there. This is going to perform just as well as the Freud Industrial blades or the Forest Chopmasters. It's only going to be a fraction of the price though. I would avoid the Freud DeWablo blades that they sell at the big box stores. If you can find the Auchlon blades local, grab one of those. If you can't find them local, I'll put the Amazon links in the description. Now for the average homeowner DIY, you get yourself a proper finish blade, you combine that with the stock blade, and that's all you're ever going to need. Mistake number 3, calibration. Now, if you don't get this right, there's a pretty good chance you're just never going to get that top quality craftsmanship with the miter saw. Now, if you've recently just purchased your saw and you still have a return window, there's a couple things that you want to check out before you decide if you want to keep the saw long term. Grab yourself a straight edge. Here I've just got a framing square. You want to check if you have a one-piece fence, you want to make sure that it is perfectly straight all the way across. Now the tolerance that you're looking for is basically a sheet of paper folded in half. That's going to work out to be about 0.254 of a millimeter. If you have a feeler gauge, that's the way to go. If not, you can use a piece of paper folded in half. This fence is very, very straight. I'm impressed. Next thing you want to do is check out the table. Now these tables are notoriously gappy. This one here doesn't look bad at all. There's a slight little gap down here, but not even big enough for the feeler gauge. The last thing to check is just to make sure that your fence is 90 degrees to the table. I'm just going to use this square here, and very nice by the blade. So like a tiny bit of a gap at the bottom, but not big enough for the gauge. So this DeWalt saw here is a work of art. That is not always the case. You can take this exact same saw, check it out, you might have a big bow in the fence. You just really never know. So if you check out your saw and you've got some squirreliness to it and you can return the saw and try out a new one, do it. Because if you have a big bow in the fence, it's going to affect almost all of your cutting. The next thing you want to do here is just quickly check and make sure that your miter stop is at a perfect 90. On this saw here, it is no. There's a bit of a gap at the back. I need to adjust that. For the DeWalt saw, super easy. You take the little blade changer and you loosen these 3 screws on the detent and tap, tap. Check to make sure it's square and then tighten back down the screws. Now let's quickly check the bevel stop, 90. And that is perfect right there. So take a couple minutes, get your saw perfectly calibrated, and the next time that you go to use it for crown molding or baseboards, you're gonna get a lot better results. Mistake number 2, dust collection. Now this is a really serious topic. My grandpa actually passed away from lung complications. He used to make these cedar Adirondack chairs in a small little shed. He'd cut all the cedar up, never had any dust collection, never wore a dust mask. He probably made 500 of these chairs. He gave them to everyone that he knew. He'd sell them. It was his thing. And yeah, I'm not saying cutting the wood in his tiny little shed is what killed him, but I really don't think it helped. So let me show you how I approach dust collection with the miter saw. If you were to take this miter saw with just its dust bag that it came with and cut this piece of trim 100 times in a row, by the time you get to the end of that 100 cuts, if you check out the air quality at breathing height, you are going to be in a very toxic zone. The small particulate is going to be over 150 and the VOCs is going to be high. Now, if you're to take this exact same setup and just hook it up to a vacuum, I've got a Festool vacuum with a switch built in. If you don't have a switch for your vacuum, you definitely need to grab one. I'll link this one in the description. You just plug your vacuum in, you plug the saw in. When you pull the trigger, it fires on. You make the exact same 100 cuts. If you test out the air quality there, you're going to be less than half of the small particulate in the air, and the VOCs are going to be 5 times less with the vacuum hooked up. So for me personally, I always have my miter saw hooked up to a vacuum. I've got this safety equipment on at all times as well. And if I'm going to be using it for an extended period of time, I do throw on the dust mask as well. Mistake number 1. Now this is the biggest one. This is what really separates beginner DIY from absolute pros. And if you're a finishing carpenter out there, you're probably going to get a little sick to your stomach watching this, because I guarantee you this has happened to you at some point. And it happens when you're set up on a job site and somebody inevitably comes along and asks if they can cut up a few 2x4s on your saw, and carnage is about to ensue. Why do people hate their miter saws? If you cut like that, you're going to burn your blade out. You're going to get horrible quality cuts. Worst of all, if you don't have the material up tight to the fence, it's going to throw it into the fence and warp it. At that point, you might as well take your miter saw down to the garbage dump and just throw it into a bin. Let me show you how to cut on a miter saw. This one goes out to all the electricians, all the plumbers, and all of the people just starting off with the miter saw. This is how you want to get it done. So let the blade come up to full speed and then keep it buttery smooth throughout the entire cut. You're going to get much better results. And if you want to see how to take a saw like this and exponentially improve the dust collection, go ahead and check out this video right over here. So highly recommend. I highly recommend. This is a real tongue twister. He is one of the most important parts of the show. Say hello to Bob.